So it is Wednesday. I have the iced coffee in hand, and you know what that means. It's Acolyte Day. Wednesday is the day where we kind of just go in, update ourselves on the Acolyte. It is absolutely 100% a check-in day when it comes to Wednesdays and the Acolyte. It's like, where do we sit today? Do we sit positive, negative on the Acolyte? And episode 7 was last night, and I watched it and just kind of want to give my thoughts overall on the episode. This was the flashback episode that many of us thought we were going to get last week, where we had that awesome episode in episode 5 where the Acolyte, aka the Sith, everybody wants to call him Sith. I'm calling him an Acolyte. I mean, the title of the show is Acolyte. Last time I checked, Acolyte. So I am calling him an Acolyte until further notice. Just because he has Sith tendencies, and he's like, you can call me a Sith. Of course, a wannabe Sith is gonna want to be called a Sith, you know. So he's an Acolyte to me because that's the title of the show, is Acolyte. He's 100% Acolyte. Acolytes are basically Sith fanatics, where they kind of like research the history of the Sith, and they kind of want to be a Sith, but they're not really a Sith. Anyway, I'm kind of like going off base, but you know, we expected this flashback episode to take place after episode 5, when the Acolyte just kind of killed everybody, but they waited an extra week, and we got the flashback episode last night instead with episode 7. Now, the one thing I noticed from a lot of people is that soon as the episode was over, I went on social media, and I see weird things on social media. I mean, social media is weird in the first place, but I saw weird things on social media, especially around the discourse of the show. I seen one guy on my Facebook. I actually ended up deleting him off my Facebook, not because his takes just doesn't make sense. And what I mean by that, he wrote, finally, only one more episode left of the Acolyte. And I just simply replied, well, if you're not liking it, why are you watching it? And then he replies some crazy thing where, like, who are you to tell me what I can watch and what I can't watch, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, if this was me 10, 15 years ago, I would have just ranted, cursed him out, called him an idiot and all that stuff. Instead, I just simply went over, unfriend. It's that simple. You know, when you get to a certain age, you don't need to deal with stupidity from people. But I don't understand why people feel the need to continue watching something if they're not enjoying it. Like, if you don't like it, why are you watching it? Like, I watched 3 episodes of She-Hulk and I was like, this is not for me. And I was out. I didn't finish watching it. And never did I go on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter and go, man, only 3 more episodes of She-Hulk left. I can't wait for this show to be over. I just stopped watching it. It was instantly over for me the moment I checked out. So I just don't understand the discourse. So my thoughts on this past episode, like I said, this was the flashback episode where we see the opposite side of what happened on episode 4, when we seen the twins. One of them wanted to be a Jedi. The parents were talking about how they were created, and we saw the massacre of the witches, but yet we knew that the Zabrak witch, the Zabrak mom, if you guys don't know what a Zabrak is, basically that is the same species that Darth Maul is, you know, with the horns and stuff. That's what a Zabrak is. So I'll be referring to her as Zabrak because I don't know her name, but she's the Zabrak witch. We know she survived somehow. Well, this episode gave us the other side of that coin to explain to us like what happened from the Jedi's point of view. And it was a very, very slow episode. I wasn't a big fan of I enjoyed almost every episode except for the flashback episode in episode 4. This one, the same kind of thing. Not that I hated this episode. It's just like I knew we were going to get this flashback, and I really thought that this was all going to take place in the first half of the episode, and then we would just pick up where we left off in the last episode, where Saul was talking to May, whatever her name is. But they didn't do that. This was another entire 25-30 minute episode of the flashbacks, and we get the other side of it. And you know, it is what it does fill in the gaps. We find out why the Jedi. We find out why the Jedi now has taken have. We found out why the Jedi has basically taken a vow of silence, and why May is hunting down all the different Jedi. We know that part of it. We know why one Jedi took a vow of silence, why the Wookiee decided to go in isolation, why they left the order and all that stuff, and why May is hunting them down. We know that now because Saul intervened. He wasn't supposed to intervene. He killed the one witch mother, and basically he meddled in business that should have never been meddled in because he felt a connection to Osha, and he kind of intervened and kind of started trouble when he was told specifically not to do so, and it kind of created like this whole situation. The Jedi did not hunt down all the witches like we thought. It was just really a misunderstanding that escalated that should never have been escalated. And I've seen some things about the way the episode ended, how people feel like the Jedi are being portrayed as bad. The Jedi are bad. Why are the Jedi lying? And it's funny because I think it's a difference in perspective. Never once did I look and say, oh, the Jedi are bad, the Jedi are lying. I never got that from this episode. From what I saw of this episode is the Jedi isn't lying. The Jedi is just not telling the whole truth. At the end of this episode, Saul's like, what are we going to tell the Jedi Order? What are we going to tell the High Council? And basically Trinity was like, look, we're just going to tell them the truth. You know, like this happened, everybody died, this happened. And it is. When you go back and rewatch that segment, she everything she said is the truth. Now the problem is they're not giving you details on everything that happened. All the details of what happened and transpired, they're not telling the High Council that. But there's a difference between lying and just not giving the details. And this whole thing about, well, Jedi isn't bad. I don't subscribe to that belief because George Lucas, he really kind of played with the different shades of the Jedi within the prequel trilogy. We knew Qui-Gon constantly questioned the High Council, the Jedi Council. He constantly questioned that. Even in Attack of the Clones, Dooku was like, if Qui-Gon was here, he would help me, because Dooku knew about the corruption within the Jedi Order. Qui-Gon knew about the corruption with the Jedi Order, and it was all about that. How the Jedi, they have been corrupt the more they stay in Coruscant. And not only that, I look at the Jedi, like George Lucas said, as guardians of the peace. They're sort of like, you know, the police department, so to speak, for the galaxy. And just like in real life, you have pockets of great, good cops, and then every once in a while you have a couple bad cops. Not to say that Saul and everybody was bad cops. I feel like they messed up, right? They messed up. Jedi do mess up. Like, if you don't believe me, the entire fall of the Republic was caused because the Jedi were clouded, and they intervened into a war they had no business being in the Clone Wars, because even Qui-Gon said, we're not soldiers. But yet the Jedi became soldiers, and that was their downfall. So it's not like the Jedi are impervious of not making mistakes. Saul's heart was in the right place, but he intervened and did things that he shouldn't have done. So the Jedi is like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to just tell them what happened, but we're not going to give the details. And you can see where that split up the four Jedi, to where one took a vow of silence, one went into like hiding and all this stuff. One thing I really liked about this episode was his lightsaber duel. The lightsaber duels in this show have been phenomenal. This is the best lightsaber duels I have seen since the prequels. Like, hands down, the best stuff Disney Star Wars has done. I absolutely loved it. And I'm glad, because a couple episodes ago, we were like, man, how are we going to have a Jedi Wookiee and we're not even going to see him fight? And then a couple episodes later, boom, here he is. Here he is fighting and he's just kicking butt and it's awesome. I feel like a lot of stuff in this episode or in this series, we're like, man, well, this don't make sense. Why does he have metal that can dis lightsaber a lightsaber, you know? And then the very next episode, they explain it. I think a lot of the questions people have episode to episode, they explain it eventually. The problem is when you have an episodic format series compared to a movie, everything's going to be explained before that movie ends. The series, most often not, everything is explained before the series ends. And when we have like an episode to episode kind of show week to week, we have questions and we're like, well, they didn't explain this, just for the very next episode for them to explain it, like the cortosis metal that the Acolyte had that distinguished everything, all that stuff. We see that. So a lot of people's complaints about, oh man, they're not giving us answers to these questions. It's like, this show's not over with. You know, wait till next week, see what happens. And then we see like awesome stuff like this that happens. And yeah, so everybody's complaining like, oh my God, the Wookiee didn't do nothing. You know, the Wookiee didn't do nothing all episode. Like we see him and then boom, he's dead. No, like you're going to see stuff. You know, it just, you got to let the story play out. The one thing I've seen a lot, and I've even been guilty of this, is the show has bad writing. And I agree, the show isn't very well written. But I want to just throw in a different perspective to this, okay? When we compare this show, we compare it to stuff like House of the Dragon, The Boys. Now, just for a second, think about it. We want to compare a Disney show to an HBO show. Like, you get what I'm saying here? Like you put Disney and HBO right next to each other. Obviously, one has one quality and goes to a certain demographic and the other doesn't, right? And the way I look at this show is not that it's poorly written. I think it's not well written, but I think it's going for a certain demographic. This show is. And what I mean by that is, let's look at two authors. Let's look at Stephen King and R.L. Stine. Both authors do horror books, right? Stephen King does very detailed, lengthy, descriptive horror books. R.L. Stine, he does Goosebumps and all these like young adult, like middle school kid type novels. And the way I look at Disney Star Wars is, I don't see a 12-year-old looking up and asking the kind of questions that we ask. You know, like I don't see like a 11, 12, 10-year-old watching this show and having the same complaints that a 40-year-old like me would have. I just don't see that. I just don't see that as a thing that happens, right? We're all late 30, 40-year-old men, and we're all like, when this don't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this writing's bad, this writing is bad. It's like, is the writing really bad, or is the writing simplistic? There's a difference. When you're writing for a certain demographic, like writing on Sesame Street is going to be completely different than writing something else for a very, very more mature audience. And I look at Disney Plus, and it's very clear the audience that they're trying to reach. That's just my thoughts on it. I don't think it's like the worst writing ever. It's just, it's for a certain audience. It's Stephen King versus R.L. Stine. And Disney Plus is R.L. Stine. HBO is Stephen King. If you want that detailed writing, you got Stephen King. You got HBO. You got House of the Dragon. This is made for a more simpler demographic that everybody can enjoy. And also with that said, they did try to give us something like Stephen King. They gave us Andor, and that wasn't very well received. I loved it, but it was very, very detailed, very descriptive, very, very great detailed writing in Andor, and a lot of people didn't like it. You know, and that's the thing. A lot, what is Star Wars? Star Wars is different for everybody. The Acolyte, I will say this: 7 episodes in, each episode had me intrigued for the next episode. And each episode I 100% wanted to tune in for. And I am curious to see what's going to happen. I feel like they have to really kind of wrap up a lot next week. Like, who's the Acolyte? Is the Zabrak his teacher? Like, where did he learn all this stuff? Was he part of the Jedi Order and then found out about what happened on this planet and kind of turned bad? Did the Zabrak manipulate his emotions? Like, so many different things that they kind of have to explain next week. And the thing with Disney Plus, the one thing I do have a negative about is they have a hard time wrapping everything up in the final episode, whether it be Miss Marvel or Obi-Wan or Mandalorian season 3 or Ahsoka. You know, they do a great job building up, and then the end is just kind of like peters out. And like Secret Invasion was another one of those. It was like, man, it was really, really good up until the end. So I hope they can wrap everything up, because I've been really intrigued with this series. I think it's some of the best lightsaber duels we have gotten in Star Wars forever. The music is phenomenal in this series. It's the only Disney Plus Star Wars show that has Star Wars type music in it, that feels like Star Wars music. And I just really, really enjoy this series from week to week. Is there a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily like some of the writing when it comes to the twins, like one minute she's turning good, next minute she's turning bad, blah 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 blah. Yes, that is definitely there. But when you look at it from the perspective of, well, what is the demographic that they're reaching? I don't think a 12-year-old kid is going to be like, I thought she was turning good, now she's bad again. I thought she was turning good, and now she's bad again. I don't think a younger demographic looks at it like that. They're just watching it, and I think that's where it really comes down to. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on this episode of The Acolyte. I enjoyed this episode. I didn't like the fact that the whole episode was a flashback again, but we got the different perspective. We got the answers that we were looking for. Let's see how they wrap this thing up in the series finale. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. I'm choking up here. That's my thoughts on it, but I wonder what you guys think. Be sure to leave your comments in the comment box below. Smash that like and subscribe button. And thank you all so much for watching.